Walk up to sentimentality, but don't become it.
If you like something that someone is doing, tell them.
Hey, welcome to the Street Shots Photography Podcast. This is Antonio.
And this is Ward.
And this is episode 225 for sometime in February, middle of February. And 225 area code.
Oh, man.
Yeah.
Okay, so and 225, place I've been to. It is southern part of Louisiana. It includes the city of Baton Rouge.
And area 225.
Yeah, and parts of south central Louisiana.
I have not been there.
Not to be confused with New Orleans, which is 504. I don't know how long it'll get us. Yeah, that's my wife used to live in New Orleans. My wife used to live in New Orleans. I remember dialing 504. So
yeah, I have not been anywhere down there in that neck of the woods.
It's interesting and different.
Travel much. Yes, I imagine so. Yeah. But yeah, hi to everybody down there who are listening in area code 225. 225. Yeah, so episode 225 for the middle of February 2025. So, I just realized that. 225 February 25. That's our number. Okay. Episode
amazing coincidence. I'm a little rusty. I skipped an episode, so
you did.
I might not be able to use my words. And thank Keith for me for taking over. You guys were really inside baseball. It was very cool. You could tell you guys are just kind of sitting across from each other, like, and this happened, and that happened, and then
Well,
this company ate that company, and where did my pictures go? It was very cool.
Yeah. Well, we did. Anyway. Well, thanks, Keith, for filling in for Wardo here. That was very generous of you. If you're listening, if you're not listening, thank you anyway. But
tell the people we know we like him.
Yeah, we did go. After that, we went to Chinatown. We met there and we photographed the first day of the Lunar New Year, and we went during the daytime. So it was, I can't remember what day it was. But we, walked around, and there were people, there were ceremonies, there were dragons all over the place, and people getting ready for like little mini parades and stuff like that. And
Year of the Snake,
yeah. And Happy New Year, and we followed a bunch of people as they were walking around, and there was a lot of drums and a lot of merriness, as it were, and firecracker kind of sounds. There were some really strange electronic devices that sounded like firecrackers.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, they were. Well, we went to. When we were done shooting somewhat, we said, let's go get lunch. We went to the Vietnamese place that you and I went to when you were in town on Baxter Street. Mm-hmm. And while we were there near the end of our meal, all of a sudden a dragon came in, or a snake, or whatever it was. And there was a lot of drum banging, and all of a sudden we heard firecrackers. And I was like, what, they're setting off firecrackers in here? And there was this thing on the wall that was like a firecracker simulator, like it almost like a clock or a calendar, and there were these like lights flashing, and it was popping as loud as a firecracker.
That's crazy.
So it was the firecracker without the smoke and the danger part of it.
The danger, yeah, exactly. The loss of limbs, yes.
Yeah, I haven't posted any. I only posted a few of those pictures. I think I posted them on.
Now Keith posted some of his to our Discord, and they're pretty cool.
Yeah,
I have to say, it was very cool.
Yeah, we walked around and did some street photography together, and it's funny to see the differences from both of our styles, which was great because we could be shooting the same thing and the pictures look entirely.
You and I have that experience too, right?
Yeah,
same place, different perspective.
Yeah. Keith's shots. There was some. He's photographing with his GR. I think it's GR2. And that is one of the cameras, or the GR3. I don't know. He wasn't on the GR3, but for me, I recommend that camera for street shooting. Like if in my classes, I say, if you could find this camera, buy it because, it is such a nice little camera for street shooting. But we'll get into that in a minute. His stuff was really good. I'm still processing my color stuff. I shot some stuff in black and white. I brought 2 cameras with me. I'll talk about one of them in a little bit, but 2 cameras. I just thought, let me try 2. And I was like, you know what? It's too much. Yeah. I should have just stuck with 1 camera because I ended up just photographing with 1 at a time. Like I was like, oh, let me do black and white. And I set my X100 6 or X100. Yeah. No, X100 VI. I'm going to call it that.
The brand new one.
The brand new one. I set that for black and white, and I was very, very excited by what I was getting. Oh, cool. And the other camera I had set for color, and it's, again, 2 different mindsets. But anyway, thank you, Keith, for filling in. It was a great conversation. And yes, inside baseball, inside stock baseball, right? Because we both came from that background. So it was nice to talk about that. And I tell people, like, people want to get into stock and stuff like that. And I said, yeah, maybe don't bother so much the way things are going, so
do stuff that's personally fulfilling. That's cool.
Yeah. But yeah, it was a fun thing. But anyway, before we go on, I recognized that in my sort of excitement to have Keith on, I actually missed that we had one of our listeners buy us a coffee. And the listener's name is, well, at least by name, is Zunabar. So I don't know who the name is, but Zunabar bought us a coffee and said in his or her message, "Love the podcast. It feels so effortless, like 2 friends catching up over coffee or a beer." So thank you, Zunabar. Really, really appreciate it. And
thank you, sir or madam.
Yeah. And if we had beers and coffees, that's what
I would have to leave the podcast partway through if I was drinking beer seriously.
Yeah, I was drinking a beer. Yeah, me too.
Little sips here and there, it'll be fine.
Although, have you tried non-alcoholic beer?
Oh yes, there's some very good ones.
Is it good?
It is. Good? Now it has. I mean, there's different brands, but there's a couple of local breweries here in town that do a fine job, and they're great. Yeah, if you got to drive or whatever, I wouldn't hesitate. They're good.
Yeah. Okay. I saw some video. It might have been a Bloomberg YouTube video or something like that, talking about the non-alcoholic beer business and how it's growing and what a niche business it is, and it was really interesting. And part of me was thinking, like, what's the point of non-alcoholic beer? Because part of what I like about a beer is getting a little bit of a buzz. And so, like, would I like it just because, but I do like the taste.
Yeah.
I like the taste of wheat beers. I like the taste of IPAs and stuff like that. And it's like, could I just have one of those and it would just be the taste and, flavor just like any other drink, any other non-alcoholic drink. So maybe I should get ones for our next show. Maybe we should have a couple of non-alcoholic beers and
I could
see what that's like. Yeah, I've got to figure out.
It's good. The thing is, you keep it cold. I know there's one major brewery that makes a version of a de-alcoholized beer that's made with rice. And as long as you keep it cold, it's fine. But once it warms up, it's like you can really taste the rice in it, and it becomes something else. But when it's cold, it's great. And on a cold day, I've had them when they're really cold, and they're fantastic on a hot day.
All right. So one of these, maybe our next episode or one of these episodes, we'll have to have a couple of non-alcoholic beers and we can do little taste tests and see taste reviews and see what they're like. If anybody's interested in those, well, because if people we're sitting here, if we were in a pub or something like that and we were having beers, we would talk about cameras, but we'd also talk about, like, hey, how does that taste? Oh, did you try this? Here, try that. Yeah. So yeah. Okay. We'll try that next time. But anyway, Mr. or Ms. Zunabar, thank you so much. We'll make you the producer, I'm losing my words these
honorary
days.
Producer?
Honorary producer of episode 225. Anyway, thank you for taking care of us. We really appreciate it. So where should we start?
Well, we've got some listener feedback that I got over the last couple of weeks. Our listener, Martin, he's also a friend of mine on Instagram. We interact every now and then on Instagram chat. He just posted a picture today, I think. He bought a whole bunch of rolls of 120 for his Rolleiflex, and he's planning to go out and do some street work with it this spring. He's in Montreal, and I think a few weeks ago, he posted old pictures from the 80s using that same equipment, and so he's getting back into it, and I'd like to think I helped with my pictures, because when I posted my pictures that I took with that Rolleicord that I have, he said, maybe I should dust off mine. And I'm like, yeah, should give it a try. So that's Martin. Thank you very much, Martin. That's good. And I'm really looking forward to the pictures you come up with. Next, our listener, Gavin, pinged me and wondered if we could just do a little shout out for a Kickstarter project he has for a book called Symphony No. 5. Gavin Labat is a photographer and musician in Australia, and his work is really good. It's really good street work, and I recommend him. And if you got a few bucks to kick his way, please do. We'll put a link in the show notes.
Yeah, we have a link
for his.
We'll have a link up there, and there's a little preview video of the book. It looks like he's got like a mock-up of it or something like that. But yeah, it's a modest project, but please, yeah, we'll put the link on there. Symphony No. 5, and it's related to our name, right? So street photography, right? So it's related to us, but it says Symphony No. 5 is a street photography project. 5 projects from the perspective of a musician. So that should be really interesting to see. So yeah, I'm happy to throw that in there, throw some money Gavin's way. But the pictures are pretty kind of like this, the little samples that we're seeing on the Kickstarter page, and the way the book is laid out too, at least in the mock-ups, looks really, really interesting. I don't know if he says how big the book is planned to be size-wise. I don't think so. Does he? Oh yeah, he goes, it's an A4 format. So that's a pretty decent size. Horizontal format, 21 centimeters by just under 30 centimeters. So landscape, 128 pages.
So that's like an
plus.
8 by 10. Yeah.
Well, yeah.
A4 is close to. Yeah, very cool.
It's a decent size. Yeah. Well, cool. I think I need this book too. So
maybe I do too. I'll go take another look at it.
Yeah. Maybe Gavin might be interested on the show when he's ready to talk about the book, in some way. So really like to push people who are like, we have been sort of behind on that. We have so many books and people we haven't talked about their books, but I really love talking about books and stuff. So Gavin, let's figure something out when you're ready for it. Cool. Wow.
Also, one more bit of listener feedback. A gentleman called Aldo pinged me on the contact form on my website, on my rosin.ca website. Hasn't happened for years. That's like somebody went in there and said, hey, I've been to Japan and I've, collect, he's got some books, Daido Moriyama and Tetsuo Suzuki, the guys we've talked about. He's got some of their books, or at least one of each. And he shared a little bit about his experience in Japan, and he sent me couple of links on ideas and inspiration for Japan. And so, Aldo, thank you, sir, for forwarding that information. I didn't reply to you directly, but I'll make a point of doing that here soon. But I want to acknowledge you on the air here. That's very, very nice of you to do that. And it helps us as a community when someone's been someplace that you're planning to go, and give you some pointers. So I appreciate that very much.
Remind us all when you're going again. I kind of forgot.
I believe I'm leaving on the 29th of March.
Okay. So we have a little bit to go for that. Yeah. All right. Cool.
I'll be coming back the 9th or 10th of April. So 11 nights or 11 days.
That might work into our schedule with you recording. So we'll see. You might still be able to, if you're able to. I'm already thinking like, it's in our time period, I was thinking, but yeah. Anyway, okay. Yeah.
So anyway, that's the listener feedback portion. And this is great. We're getting more and more feedback all the time. I feel there's some kind of growth going on, and I appreciate that very much. And it's good to get some affirmation with that. So
I agree, and I love hearing from people all over the world who are listening to us, not just local-ish, on our continent. We've got people in multiple places, so that's really exciting for me. And yeah, thank you, everybody. It it kind of reminds me of like when I'm in a class and stuff like that, and when I start getting people asking questions in the class, because often my class is like just me sort of talking to them, but I try to engage them. And then when I start getting that feedback from students or questions from students, what's great is that they're not just asking for themselves, or they're not just they're doing it for the rest of the people. And it's great. And so when we get feedback from you guys who are listening, it's that same kind of experience for me. I feel like we're almost like creating a feedback loop. We can direct our energies towards what you guys are, asking us, or even just that, even just any kind of comments and stuff like that. In fact, we could almost do a show on like someone's comments, like, we get a lot of subject matter from people who are reaching out to us too. So if you got ideas for shows, throw them out to us, the stuff that we haven't covered yet. Because sometimes, we make the stuff up as we go.
That's the whole idea.
Shaking his head.
Our easygoing nature.
Yeah.
We don't know what we're talking about, but it's good.
We don't know. Yeah. Like you said, if we were sitting down in a bar, we wouldn't necessarily like text each other and say, well, we're going to talk about this ahead of time. I mean, we do that for the show sometimes because we have to have some idea, but we kind of make it up sometimes. So anyway, yeah. So yeah, speaking of class, I just had a class. Was it yesterday?
Oh yeah, the days this time of year, you don't know even what day of the week it is.
Yeah. Yeah, I was teaching a Lightroom class, which is once I decided on how to teach my classes, they've become less of a burden to me. And this class was kind of a burden. And even though I set it up, but what I do now is I mix it up a little bit. I don't want to really just sit behind a computer and show them, okay, well, you press this button and you do this, and you do that. And it's just not me. And when I decided one day, like, I'm not going to do that, I'm also going to talk about context and how are you going to process your pictures and what are you going to think about it? And, once I mix that stuff up, so it's not all just of like a YouTube video, but live session, it becomes way more interesting, at least to me. And it does for the people who showed up at the class. So yeah, I was doing that last night, which was fun. It got me really tired. But what was I going to say? The other thing. Yeah. Also, so Keith and I were out in Chinatown photographing I think it was the first day of the new year, or at least of the celebrations. And I went with two cameras, and I think I mentioned on the show that I had ordered an XM5 from a Fujifilm X-M5. Well, I had gotten it, and so I put it through some rounds with the street shooting in Chinatown. I mean, I had it for a little bit, but I don't think I had it when I was recording the last show. So sometime between the past few weeks, I got it. Anywho, it's, I know, again, I always say we're not talking about equipment here, but we're photographers, so we have to talk about them a little bit. I mean, it's part of the thing. And I have to recommend this camera highly.
Cool.
Yes. The only thing I'm not a big fan about, and this is probably going to be, if anybody is interested in this camera, and you read the reviews on it, it doesn't have a viewfinder. And that makes it really kind of interesting when you want to do certain kinds of shots, right? Especially if you're in bright light where you'd want to put the thing up to your eye. But that being said, it is a fantastic little camera. It is teeny tiny. And I mean teeny tiny. It's a little chubby. It's a little thick, but it's so small that I had to buy a little grip to put on it. I bought a little small rig grip to put on it. And it's also my first silver topped Fuji camera.
Right. Oh, your X100s aren't even silver.
No,
you have black X100s.
Every camera I've got, except for the only camera that I have that's got a silver top, or that I had, I should say, was a Nikon FM2. And my ex-wife took that when she left. She thought that was an appropriate gift for her. So I didn't have much to say about that. But every camera I've had since then has been a black top. So this one I got as a silver top, mainly because The black topped one, or the full black one, was not available for a very long time. And then this one was available. And so I thought, well, if I want the camera, I'll get this little silver one. And I would say if anybody's looking to either get like a starter camera from Fuji, or like you're going to recommend a camera from someone to start with, this is the camera to get. It is a little powerhouse, I have to say.
Now the guts of it are very similar to my XS20, right?
Yes, it is. It is got a lot of similar guts. It even has little on some of the newer Fuji cameras. They have a section in the back where the screen opens up, where you can attach a fan to. So when you're doing video work, it's sort of like higher resolutions, so the sensor doesn't heat up so fast. This uses the same fan as the XH2 and your XS20. It's got the little screw-in mounts and stuff like that. So it's kind of built also for doing video. And I haven't really shot a lot of video with it yet, but I can see using this as a second camera for video along one of my other, my XH cameras. It does have, is a very capable little camera. The little dials on the top for switching film simulations is really cool. So you can dial in a film sim right from the top of that and go to a menu. And, it's got the regular PASM menu mode dial on top. If you got big hands, maybe not the best camera for you. If you do, you probably need to get a grip. The grip does add a little bit more weight to it, but I like that. It gives it a little solid feeling.
How does it feel with the lenses you're using? Like, I can imagine it being a bit front heavy.
Well, I haven't used any big lenses on it so far. Actually, the lens that I got on the same day with it was this from this company I've never heard of before, called Brighton Star, BRIGHTIN space star. And they came out with a 35 millimeter manual focus f/0.95, and it's silver. So it looks like one of these old, it looks like one of these old,
like my dad's old Zeiss lens on his old Praktica. Yeah.
Yeah.
Very cool.
And this lens is about as heavy as the camera itself. So it does make it, this thing is dense. I've actually mostly only used manual focus lenses on this lens thing so far. Although I did take some sunrise pictures with 18 to 55 on it. The focus on it, the autofocus so I did get a little slew of new lenses. So I got that one. I did buy a TT Artisans 25 millimeter 2.0. That's also a manual focus lens because it's teeny tiny. It's not quite pancake, but it's teeny tiny. It actually feels right on this lens. But I also just got a TT Artisans 56 millimeter f1.8 autofocus. And this one weighs next to nothing on it. It doesn't have an aperture ring on the lens, but it is a very fast autofocus camera. And I was playing with the autofocus on this little X-M5, and it's really fast.
Very cool.
So, and the reason why I got this lens is I have a 56 in my closet that is dying, and I thought
the
it was
Fuji
just cheaper.
56?
No, it was a
Viltrox.
I think it's a Viltrox. Yeah, something's wrong with it, and I'm not a big fan of taking to repair it. And I'm imagining, this lens was like $130 or something. I don't know what it was. It was really cheap. I imagine this is cheaper to buy. I mean, hate that, but cheaper to buy a new one than to fix the old one. So I don't even know it can be fixed. Anyway, it's been a while since I recommend an inexpensive Fuji camera, for people who want to get into this for the first time. Like I said, I haven't shot any video for it yet, but I imagine the video is really good. So if you want a hybrid camera, it's got the flippy out screen, which I'm not a big fan of. But I have done some selfies with myself in it. And so if you're going to do vlogging or something like that, it's great to have. It just, those screens kind of, on all the cameras, they kind of feel flimsy. I'm always worried that they're going to break off or something like that. And so I'm just not a huge fan of it, but it's okay. I can live with it. But yeah, no viewfinder. So that does make it a little tricky to use when, in bright light and stuff like that, and sometimes you just want to have that up to your eye. I don't really want to hold it away from my face.
Well, there's like there's like a mic jack or something that's sort of like where you'd imagine the EVF would be.
Yeah.
It looks like
It does.
an old Leica or something with those little viewport eyepieces kind of thing almost.
It does,
but
and it's
a
like
rubber
you want to
boot,
put
right?
your eye to it. You want to. It's this little. Yeah, it looks like a little PC slot, a PC terminal thing here.
Yeah.
You do want to put your eye to it, and you don't. Oh, sorry. The other thing is, I did buy that little flash that you talked about a couple of episodes ago.
Oh yeah. The
little Godox.
Godox, yeah.
Yeah, it's a something mini, Luxo Mini, or I don't know, something like that.
Lux
And
Junior,
I put it,
I think.
Yeah, Junior, Mini Junior, whatever. It is. And I put it on this camera, and it is fun. First of all, so if you talk about just the looks, right? I'm sorry, I'm going on this, but you just talk about the looks. It looks really cool. It looks retro, just like this camera does. But I did some test pictures of my cats and me with this flash, and I like really underexposed the background and did the flash. And I was like, I need to be shooting like this. There's something I need to shoot like this, because it was a lot of fun to use just like this little teeny tiny flash that wasn't a big deal. Like you said, 2 AAA batteries. I wish there were double A's, but I guess that makes it smaller. But I don't know. It had a nice little feel. It's like a small little kit, like something that you can just throw in a tiny bag.
Mm-hmm.
I really can't recommend this stuff enough. So
yeah, I'm looking forward to walking around the back alleys in Tokyo with it. So
yeah. Now I'm wishing I could go with you. I'd bring this little camera with me. I would just bring this one camera. Yeah, I was shooting color with this in Chinatown and I set up a recipe on it, and it was a little too yellow, but I think it's okay. I just didn't to process them. But I don't know. I think they really hit it out of the park with this little thing. I really hope. I don't know. I wish it had image stabilization. It doesn't, but like I grew up without image stabilization, so they're just like hold the camera steady. Just like hold your hand steady. Shoot it. The appropriate shutter speed for the lens. And what was the other thing I was going to say? Last thing. The picture quality, at least with the lenses I was using, I really haven't used many of the Fuji lenses on it yet. Mm-hmm. But I'm shooting at sometimes 10,000 ISO, 10,000, 12,000 and they look great. They're speckly, but they're not. I wouldn't call them noisy, like in the way that noise is like. Ugh. It was like they look nice, and I was like, I could shoot with this. I could do a lot of stuff with this little camera. So. It does make a nice little second camera, I say. So that's a thumbs up for sort of an unofficial review, because we don't do reviews on this channel, on this show, right? Yeah, but
it's just what we happen to run into. We'll talk about, and
yeah,
our experiences, and sometimes those experiences are new gear.
Yeah, well, for street photography, I should have just gone out with this one camera. I was just a little worried about, like, I did want to shoot black and white and color, but my brain is just, it's too much switching back and forth. And I know I could always process them in black and white. I didn't think, but it was kind of fun looking through the viewfinder or looking at the screen and seeing black and white, or seeing color. And I guess I could have just switched the film simulation dial there, but it was my first time out with it. So, but yeah, next time would just be the one camera. But as a street shooting camera, I think it would work really well. You do look like a little tourist. You don't look like anybody, especially if you got the bendy screen out and you're sort of looking down on it. You can be really unobtrusive and just, I don't know. So I think it's, when the weather gets a little bit better and I'm out a little bit more, I'll be giving it more chance to shoot with. But yeah, I like it. I definitely like it. So thumbs up. 2 thumbs up. So yeah,
way up. Yeah, no, it's anything like the responsiveness of my XS20. Yeah, it's a pretty spectacular rig.
Yeah.
When I talk about my trip here, I'll talk a little bit.
Yeah, we'll talk about your trip
ISO
next.
Experiences. But...
You did something, was it this week? No, last week.
Well, last week, but before we get to that, there was something that went on this past Saturday that I attended. The very famous American art photographer Todd Hido was in town.
Ooh.
And he came and he talked at our public library, and it was very inspiring. The genesis of his trip here was funny. One of the young salesmen at the camera store did a little reel on Instagram about his favorite photographer, Todd Hido, and tagged him. And Hido responded and said, well, why don't I come up? Why don't I come up? So the camera store coordinated with Leica Canada, and they brought him up and his wife, and I think his son also came up because they were kind of managing the venue a little bit with the people from the camera store, and and it was great. Then the place was packed. I don't know how many people were there, maybe 150, 200 people, somewhere in that. Wow. For a community the size of Calgary, it's pretty amazing. And he did a little autobiography slideshow kind of thing, and there was a ton of us in line to have books about, we brought, if you had a book of his from home, you brought it, or you could buy one at the venue like I did, and they were offering a discount on it, and you get in line and you talk with him, and everyone who got in line, he gave you as much time as you wanted to talk. Was that ever great? And so he talks about his experience and his little tricks, which he thought he would keep top secret. And one of his mentors was Larry Sultan. And he says, why, he puts glycerin on the windshield of his car to make it all teardroppy and whatever, in case it doesn't happen to be raining. And it was like, well, that's a top secret thing. And Larry's like, nobody cares. Just tell anybody what you're doing. And one of the things that Hido was saying was, if you like something that somebody is doing, tell them. And that's how the relationship came with us, because Chris at the camera store did this thing, and he's been told, it was somebody does something that somebody likes. This is one story. I'll share one story he did. Okay. He took a picture of a woman with trees in the background. Trees are out of focus. She's turned away from the camera, and the color of her hair blends. It's in sharp focus, but it blends with the color palette of the trees behind. And it's a kind of mysterious, maybe soothing, maybe disturbing, depends on your state of mind. Anyway, it's this picture, and it was evocative and certainly interesting. Well, the film director, Spike Jonze, loved this picture, got a print of it, and he took a piece of masking tape and he wrote the word "her" on it and stuck it onto the print and put it on his desk or somewhere in his house and contemplated over it. And he ended up writing the movie Her, which is that AI movie about the guy who falls in love. Yeah, and I think Scarlett Johansson and Amy Adams. And so it was the inspiration for that. And the soundtrack, some of the music was done by the band Arcade Fire, and the album I think it was on vinyl. I think you could only get the soundtrack on vinyl. But anyway, the cover art was Hido's picture of this woman with the piece of masking tape on it.
With the masking tape on it?
It's cool. Like, yes, it's Arcade Fire. And so then I'm like, all these things that just happenstance. So the book I got of his is called The End Sends Advance Warning, which is a very ominous title. Yeah. You and I had chatted a bit, and I know you had purchased it and it just arrived the other day for you. There's a lot to absorb. Like, the subject matter is relatively simple on the face of it, but there's some deep, I don't know if it's symbolism or just emotion in the images. And so we're just going through it. They're dark images for the most part. And there's a bit of kind of it's a personal project anyway, but what also comes in the book, there's some smaller pictures that are kind of pasted into the book in different places to offer a little bit of, I don't know what you would call it, change in the flow of the book. So you look at these little kind of visually related pictures that are little tiny things like 2 inches by 2 inches. And there's also a vellum booklet that has family pictures from his family and his wife's family. And it's translucent. So you go through these family pictures with this translucent quality to them, and you're having to work pretty hard to see the individual images, but they bleed into each other. And it's sort of, I think it's a metaphor for life. And I mean, you look at the whole booklet through, at a light source, and there's one image in the very center of a baby that must mean something. So there's a whole bunch of crazy symbolism and meaning to it that is going to take a while to absorb. So I just wanted to say I went to that show. If you have a chance to go to, if you have any interest in Todd Hido, and his last name's Hido, Hido, he's definitely worth looking up. It's very contemplative work and very subjective. It's not like, here, I'm telling you what's going on. It's like, I'm showing you something. It means something to me. I'm not telling you exactly what it is, but it means something to you. And so it was really good to be able to see him, meet him, shake his hand, and have him personalize a book for me. So
that's really nice. Yeah. I just got the book today, actually. Okay. In the mail, and it is the size of a coffee table.
It's big.
It is a big book. And I think I want to reserve this. I think we should do an episode talking about him and this book, and in sort of like, when I was flipping through it as sort of a preview thought process, like, I haven't absorbed it at all yet. I just flipped through it tonight before our show. I didn't flip through it. I went through it slowly, but I'm looking at it, and it's like, I am going to need time to think about this as well. I mean, there is something going on in those pictures, and there was a few pictures. There was a feeling that it was a similar feeling I was getting to, like, when I was looking through Monument by
Trent Park.
Trent Park. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah. Another Australian. Shout out to the Australians in the crowd.
Yeah, Australians, yeah. There was something that it was like, this book was tapping into a similar part of my being that Park's book was doing as well. Mm. I don't have a lot of books like, I don't have a lot of photography books that are in this genre. I don't even know what to call it, but it does require a different part of my sort of paying attention, my brain, my soul, or something like that to get into. And I know there's something, like, it's worth it. I can tell that it's worth spending that energy on it. So yeah, I guess we'll both need some time to sort of look it over, but I'd like to do an episode just on him as well. It'd be nice to.
I would say the size of the book helps, because if it's on a table in front of you, it completely fills your vision. It's too big to, like, put on your knee and just read. You got to lay it out in front of you.
Yeah.
And it fills your vision like you're in a movie theater almost. And there's a cinematic aspect, although not always, not all the images cinematic, but it's very broad view. And, like, there's impression that you get in the composition, and then there's details. And if you want to dig into the details, or certain parts of the frame that are in detail and other parts of it are foggy for one reason or another, what's intentional, what's not, what's he trying to present? And it's like, there's so much going on.
Yeah. It was very cool. I'm glad I have it. I just don't know where I'm going to put it. Like, you have to put it. I'm going to put it on top of my other books.
On top of one of the, as long as it's deep, your bookshelf's deep enough for it to go in sideways.
There's no bookshelf around that's as deep as this book. Maybe my IKEA shelves in here. Anyway, thanks for telling me about this book, and thanks for letting us know that you went to this show. I'm glad you got to do it, and hopefully
he was very appreciative. I mean, he just came at the end of a really cold, real deep cold snap, bitter cold, and he came out of it, and he said, "That's okay. I'm from Ohio." He grew up close to Lake Erie, so there's a lot of snow and humidity and kind of winter misery. So that didn't seem to faze him at all. And he was here earlier in the week. I mean, it was on a Saturday, and I think he was in town on Monday or Tuesday. And he was driving. He was a local photographer, was sort of driving him around the countryside. And he said, the rolling hills and wintry landscapes remind me so much of his home in Ohio. So I'm like, okay, all right. You win. And then he shared some of those pictures in his talk, and they, like, fit right in with his aesthetic in the book. That is, like, very cool. Yeah. Hey, this is just a few miles away, yay.
Well, I'd like to hear more about the talk and what you learned about it. So let's put that on the to be talked about soon agenda, because I'd be interested in that. So awesome. I'm glad you went. If he comes to New York City, I'll go. I hope that might be something that will happen.
He did say he went to see the Bescher exhibit at the Met.
That.
And so we could have showed some of those pictures too. He might have been there when we were there. How do we know? Yeah, exactly. So
that's funny.
Yeah, I forgot to say
like,
that.
oh,
Yeah.
he looks familiar. Maybe I saw him at the Met. Yeah.
Yeah.
Saw him at
That time the security guard was chasing me away because I almost touched one of those prints. Maybe he was just walking by at that moment.
Yeah. Did you actually did that happen?
Well, no, I was like pointing at it really close, and the security guy, or like, when I was like the docents or whatever, is like, "What are you doing?" I'm like, "I'm just pointing." Okay. It's okay. I'm not going to touch anything. Promise.
You know, all of us, all the listeners, we've all been waiting to hear about your Daytona trip.
Okay, so the reason why I missed the last show was I flew down to California to go to this auto race that I used to go to.
You flew down where? To where?
I flew down. You fly to Orlando and then you drive about an hour and a half out to Daytona Beach, which is on the Atlantic side of the Panhandle. So you drive east from Orlando. And I rented a Mustang convertible, which was great because it was like 40 degrees and rainy. Because that's what you want. Right?
That's what you wanted, yeah.
So I get in my Mustang and I'm cruising along, whatever, and I get to, whatever. So yes, so I know this guy in Brooklyn, and he sent me this telephoto lens because I don't have a telephoto zoom. So this guy I know from Brooklyn sent me this lens. It just arrived a couple of days before I left. I don't know why I waited so long. I should have because I wasn't I had really no intention of buying one before and whatever. So you very graciously sent me a lens, which I'm going to buy from you, by the way, the conversation we have to have. So I go down there to watch this auto race. It is interesting in a couple of respects. One is I had extraordinary access that I wouldn't usually have as a fan.
Well, hang on a second. Sorry, I want to stop you for a second.
Yeah.
Can you explain a little bit about the race for those of us who don't know anything about Daytona?
Yeah, so I'm getting to that.
Oh, you are getting to. I'm sorry.
I'm getting to that.
Ahead.
So
okay, just want to make sure.
It allowed me to go places that usually normal fans don't usually go, namely near pit lane, where you can take pictures of the teams actually servicing the cars during the race. The other thing is it's a 24-hour race. So it's like an American version of the 24 Hours of Le Mans, which is the most famous 24-hour race there is. And if you're a NASCAR fan, you know of Daytona as being one of the super speedways. It's this 2.5-mile loop that goes all the way around and around and around. But for the 24-hour race, they modify it. So it's not just going around and around. There's like there's a couple little infield sections where you have to go around these loops inside the track and go back out and so on. So it's not just, buzzing around like crazy NASCAR cars. So those are the interesting aspects of it for me. Now, did that address your issue that you had about what's going on with the race, or
no? I just don't know anything about the history of it. I'm like, why is it 24 hours? What kind
it's been going on for?
I'm not a car racer, so I don't know.
Okay, so it's been going on for about 60 years. The race, the 24-hour race, has been going. It's inspired by the 24 Hours of Le Mans, which has been going on since 1923. So that's a very old race in France. Yeah.
So when they say 24 hours, I'm like, the cars are racing around 24 hours.
They go about 3,500 miles in 24 hours. Yes.
Okay. And I'm assuming it's not the same driver in each car. They switch out drivers. Okay.
Most teams have 3 drivers. Some have 4. And there are rules. A driver cannot drive any more than 4 hours in any given 6.
Okay.
And that sort of thing. So you have to rest your drivers. Okay. And so those are sort of the rules. Also, there's different types of drivers too. You have professional drivers. For instance, there was quite a few. I think there were 13 Formula One drivers drove in that race this year. And then you have, those are what you would call a platinum driver. They're assigned certain ranking. And then you have what are called gold drivers who've won championships. For instance, if they won this particular championship before, then they're called a gold driver. And then you get down to what are called bronze drivers. Bronze drivers are what you call a gentleman driver or a lady driver, who are kind of like that, that rich brother-in-law that had that cleaning business that went well, and he's like a multimillionaire now, and his hobby is racing, and he went to all these, racing schools and stuff, and he's good enough that he got some break and he can afford to fund a team, and that team has, is worth a couple $1 million, and then he can kind of buy himself. He has to have enough talent to be able to drive, but he doesn't drive very much in 24 hours. He might drive half an hour or an hour or whatever, one stint, which is about 45 minutes. He'll do that a couple of times just to get his feet wet and to get hours in the car. So those are the bronze drivers. And that's the driver part of it. The car part is interesting because there are 4 different classes and they're all on the track at the same time. So at the bottom, you have what is called the GT Daytona cars, which are the Ferraris and Corvettes and Lamborghinis and cars that you might recognize from the street. Aston Martin. They're like cars you'd recognize on the street, specially modified so they're tough enough to go the 24 hours. But they're not street legal. They've got special ground effects and wings and things like that to make it look all fancy and racy and that sort of thing. And then, so those bronze drivers, they have to have one bronze driver to be in the GTD class, which is the lowest class. They're supposedly the slowest cars. And then there's a GTD Pro class, which is all professional drivers. They're usually factory drivers, like the drivers that test the new Mercedes or the new Ferraris or the new Porsche 911s, those sorts of things, right? So that's GTD Pro. Then you have sort of a Pro-Am, what's called a prototype class. Now, the prototype cars are really cool. They look like little spaceships, and they're sort of like a Formula One car that's got a body on it. And so there's almost like an airplane cockpit round windshield kind of thing for where the driver sits, and the engine's directly behind him and so on. And it's got fenders and that sort of thing, and little wings and what are called dive planes off the front wheels to help keep the front of the car down. So there's 2 prototype classes. There's what's called the Prototype 2, which is the Pro-Am class of prototype, and they're a spec car. Everyone has the same car and the same engine in that class. So
I see. Okay.
So it's a pretty fair racing for them, and it's also a way for a driver who wants to come out of the GT class, which is the production car based class, into something fancier and more futuristic, I guess. And then the top class is called GT Prototype. I don't know why they put GT back, and they used to be called Le Mans Daytona. Those cars, most of them are hybrid cars. They have relatively big engines, and they might have an electric motor, like a hybrid, like you'd have on a hybrid car.
Yeah.
The most fun one of those is the Cadillac. The Cadillacs are very, I call it gashy slashy. They're very angular looking cars. But when they take off from the pit, they have the whine of the electric motor when they leave the pit. So it's very quiet, but it makes a sound. And then about 200 feet down the pit lane, they go, and the engine starts up because you're basically bump starting the engine. And it's
really?
and it's like a big V8 like you would have in a high-end Cadillac or a Corvette. And of course there's no muffler, right? So it makes this wonderful boom sound, and then it takes off. Those are the fastest cars, and they all race, and you got to keep track of scoring and timing, and scoring has to keep track of where all those cars are in the track and who's doing
racing
what.
Is each class racing each other, or there's all just one race?
No, it's one race, but they're all racing each other in their class.
So
if you're in the lower class, if you're in the GT class, you're always being passed by the prototypes.
Right.
So as soon as you get to a place where there's a kind of a gap in the track, you're looking in your mirrors waiting for the prototypes to go zooming by you because they go that much faster. And so there's very often there can be little tussles. The GT driver doesn't see the prototype coming and turns in front of him, and if the ex-Formula One driver that's in the prototype, he dodges out of the way at the right moment. And you're like, oh, gee, that ever happened?
It sounds like Atlantic Avenue here.
Yeah. Well, you watch a little bit of it. The thing about it is there's 180 drivers, 56 cars, 60 cars, lots to keep track of. And it's fun because it's kind of the fun and excitement and hairy chestedness of auto racing, but at the same time, it's an intellectual exercise determining what, who's where, what's going on, what's wrong with this team, what happened to this car, what did they do to fix it. Sometimes a car goes off and you think the race is over for them. It comes back in 10 minutes, it's ready to go, and suddenly they're in sixth place. Like, how did that happen? Like, there are all these stories. And then there's the kind of whatever, the metaphysical, the metaphor for life, the rich kids always have the advantage and you never know, things can go wrong and then the underdog can come. And that was the case in GTD. There was a team that this was their first year, was actually a Canadian team with the bronze driver was a rich guy from Canada. He got a couple of factory drivers, guy from Germany, and I've forgotten where the other guy's from. And they end up winning the GTD class in their first race. And
wow.
They were the underdog. No one expected them, and they just kept clicking the laps and being consistent and not making mistakes, and they ended up winning. So there are these great stories that happen during these races. So there's a lot going on in your head.
Is this the first time you've been there as a photographer, or have you been there before?
No, I've always, every time since 2009, I started going to these races. I do shoot some pictures just for my own pleasure. I'm not. It's hard, and I'll get into it a little bit here. It's hard to make, for me anyway, to make auto racing an interesting subject because it's just cars going around a track. And the people who don't like racing, I get it completely because it's just cars making a lot of noise going around a track. So what is it that you can do to make it interesting photographically speaking? Now, there's a guy in the Pacific Northwest, his name's Camden Thrasher. He does amazing impressionistic images of auto racing that is kind of otherworldly, and I'd love to be able to do what he does. But when I go to these races, I'm a fan. I'm 75% fan and 25% photographer. Like, I like to take in the ambiance of being at the track and all that kind of stuff. I don't want to be spending that much time looking through the camera, but I was torn this time because I had this extraordinary access, which you could only dream of. There's no, without my friend being able to procure these passes for me and his other friends, I would have just been sitting in the grandstand like everybody else. And so this was a way to honor that. And I didn't know when I got that lens from you that I would be doing that. And thankfully I did get it in time. I was able to work with it. Now we can get into my gear feedback in a second here, but so my mindset was, I'm still there 25% as a photographer. I'm happy to shoot, like, let's do it. I'll be up all night and take pictures and whatever. And I'm really looking forward to the night pit stops, which is my favorite thing ever in an endurance race. I don't know. I dream about stuff like that. Guys up all night, guys and girls up all night, just trying to keep this car going so it has a chance to win, the next day. So that's kind of my state of mind at the time. The act of shooting was difficult for me, and I think I had, certainly in the beginning. So the race goes from 1:40 in the afternoon on Saturday to 1:40 in the afternoon on Sunday. I arrive on Wednesday, come into town on Wednesday, and then go have dinner with friends and whatever Wednesday night and make gentlemen's bets about who's going to win or whatever, tell funny stories, catch up. I haven't been down there in 7 years. So this was like, I'm like, trying to get back up to speed. Thursday is kind of the best day to meet drivers and poke around in the garages and see. One heavenly thing about American racing is that your pass, even your default pass to go into the track, allows you to walk up and down and almost touch the cars if you want. Talk to team members, talk to drivers, get signatures, shake hands with your favorite drivers. Like, it's amazing, amazing experience to be able to do that. So that's my Thursday. And then Thursday afternoon, Thursday morning and Thursday night, there's practice, which is the cars go around and try and get set up and all that kind of stuff. And I was really struggling with that lens and the XS20, finding an autofocus mode and getting the image stabilization to settle down for me. And I'm sure a lot of it was my technique, my panning technique. I mean, even with the twin lens, trying to take a picture shooting up that building, I was struggling. And I just got to remember to follow through, twist from the waist, like get it, change the autofocus so that it, acquires a subject that runs rapidly into the frame, and be very sticky on it. Don't be distracted by other details in the image. And as I pan, I'm panning through fences and doing a whole bunch of really hard things, and the camera's really struggling. So I even resorted at times to disabling everything, pre-focusing on a spot on the pavement I knew the car was going to be, like it was 20 years ago, and doing it. And I was having as much success doing that as letting the camera do all of the work. And I would see that the autofocus square would be on the car until it was about where I was going to take the picture, and then it would shatter off into the fence or into the stands in the background. And it was, now the cars are a couple of 100 feet away as they go by, but they're going 200 miles an hour. So my panning has to happen in about 2 seconds. From the time it comes into the view to the time it goes out of view, a little bit less than 2 seconds. So in that time I'm framing, and I'm comfortable with that. I mean, even my rodeo, like I've got a couple of seconds to get lined up here, but the camera's like, it's got a mind of its own. And so, it's on me. I mean, it was a new combination for me. I got more practice to do. So that's what happened on the Thursday.
That was a good practice anyway. I mean,
yeah, it was a good practice. And Thursday was good because I went through what I call my initial disappointment. A lesson that I think I learned is that I should have brought my laptop with me. I thought I wouldn't have time to import, upload anything, and just have a look and see where the focus is at, because you can't always tell from the back of the chimping is one thing, but having a look in Lightroom just to those mid-course corrections. Like even in Mexico, I took my laptop with me. Pardon me. So that was part of it. So that was another lesson. So for the race day, and for actually from Thursday on, I had 2 cameras. So I had the XS20 with that 55 to 200 that you sent me, which is a great lens. It's small. The whole package is small. And I go out to 200 millimeters, and it's like, I had a 70 to 200 on my old Canon gear before. And I go, whoa, this is like, ooh, this is at least that far. I'm like, this is good. I'm happy. I was happy. The zoom range was actually perfect for that venue, and I wouldn't need anything longer for that, for what it was I ended up capturing. You don't know till you go there and you start fooling around, right? So that part was good. And then I had one of my street cameras, my XE3, which I had in New York, with a 23 millimeter on it. And that was for covering shots. I did a lot of just taking pictures of individual cars, and I sent you the link to my album for my friends from around the world who I meet at the races. I give them, part of the gift I give them is, as our friendship and everything, is to give them access to this album, and they can download the pictures to print them and have personalities sign them, have their drivers sign them. So
that's nice.
Most of them are just cars, and I can take or leave the car. There are cars I like better than others, but for me, it's the experience of being at the track and the stories and all that I was talking about before.
Yeah.
But what I also did at night, especially, was to behind the pits, which had access to the pit tents where all the, the nerve center for the teams are. And they're, they have these TV screens up, and all the telemetry comes from the car, just kind of space age kind of thing. Is kind of the human dramas that go on, people falling asleep, people doing stuff, tire technicians having conversations. They're only lit from some distant spotlight somewhere. Got these kind of, I think, kind of evocative nighttime pictures, which I haven't really done very much of that before that I can tell. And then the pit stops at night, which were like heaven, which was the thing I was really looking forward to when I knew that I was going to be in pit lane and that I had this longer lens that I could do this. There are a couple of things I wanted. I wanted to get actual live pit stops. Now, pit stop is not, it's much more exciting to see it on video because there's a lot of activity around the car. This then happens that they gas it up, and then they put the tires on, and then they do this stuff, and then the guy climbs up on the front of the car, and he wipes the windshield down and all that kind of stuff. When you're taking a still picture of it, it's just like these blobs of humanity on the car, right? So you have to do something to make it interesting. And one of the more interesting aspects is there's the guy that has a wheel gun. It's called a wheel gun. It's like an impact, or it is an impact wrench, an air powered wrench that they use to take the wheels off and replace them. Loosen, take the wheel off, put the new wheel on, and tighten. There's those guys do most of the dancing, if you want to call it that. So as they're coming from the far side of the car and running back towards the pit lane, they whip the air hose, and it does this kind of sine wave thing, and the air hose goes back behind the pit wall, or at least beside it, so the car's not going to run over it. So what I was trying to do was trying to get that guy who has the wheel gun to, do his flip thing and jump back to the other side, the inside of the car, to get ready for the car to leave. And so there was one picture I think I got of a Ferrari where the guy's just doing that very thing, and he's jumping down on the far side of the car, and he's got the wheel gun in his hand. And I don't know, I don't think he has a tire in his other hand. But
is that the black and white picture? Is it black and white?
No, it's a color picture.
Oh.
It's one of the ones I posted that I edited actually in the moment from the camera, Lightroom in the camera. I got to use that X app on the phone too to upload pictures from the camera to my phone at 3:00 in the morning. It was just like, I'm standing in the pits. I just took this picture, a minute ago, and now I'm uploading it and I'm posting it. So that part was cool, and that app works pretty well.
Yeah. Let me. Before we get into that, I want to get, because I'm worried about our time here a little bit, but the pictures that you sent to our group to show sometimes were some of the black and white stuff that you did. And it was really interesting because personally, I don't think I've seen too many racing pictures or even pit pictures that were black and white, and there's something obviously so very different about that, because the whole sport seems to be about color.
Yeah.
In general. And so you chose, especially at night, right? It seems like most of your black and white shots are at night. What was the idea behind that for you?
Two things was, could I do it? Could I make it interesting enough? And at night, by nighttime, a couple of things happen texturally. One is some of the tire residue from the track and the other cars builds up on the body of the car itself. And so it gives it a kind of spotty texture to it. Also, there's rubber that collects in the pit lane. When the cars peel off, they, literally burn rubber, and it lays down and leaves this weird sheen on the pavement itself. So given my little tricks that I do in Lightroom, the way I mess around with dehaze and my shadows and highlights, I can accentuate that a little bit. So I can give the cars a little bit of, the car especially, and the pavement, a little bit of texture. And it also makes the people and the helmets that have a little bit of glint from they started a few years ago. Actually, each of the teams have what's called a gantry that goes over that lights the actual pit box where the cars stop. And they're these glary LED strips. They're a pain in the butt in that they do some flare into the lens, but I kind of like them because they sort of evocative. Nice. They're like that fluorescent light in the shop that's all by itself, that kind of just lights it, and it's a bare, very sourcey kind of light, and it's this light bar that goes across, and for me it adds kind of to because outside of that, it's complete darkness other than the headlights of the cars on the track beside. So that's one thing for the black and white. The other inspiration that occurred to me at the time that I was shooting them was, it's not part of my childhood, but it's the people in Europe remember, and I think they still make them. There's a French graphic novel and comic book set called Michel Vaillant, and he's a superhero who's a race car driver. And the comic book is very old. It goes back to, I believe, to the 50s or 60s. And there are some images that I remember having just being a fan of the sport. I kind of came up against it and saw my friends from Europe would reference these old comic books. And I'd go look through them, and you would see these images, and there'd be, he'd be this big sound effect, over like, these cars are loud. And he'd show pictures of Le Mans or Reims or these different places in France where this Vaillant character used to drive his cars. And so the early comic books were black and white. And so I was thinking, what could I do that kind of had that feeling of that graphic novel.
Oh, yeah.
And so I was thinking about that a little bit. And there's one picture I'm particularly proud of, and I got a really good reaction to it. And I got over 1,000 hits, I think, on my Facebook page, because it was shared of a P2 car of a prototype with the lead mechanic crouching in front of it, holding his hands up like, like it's not time to go yet. And in the background over his shoulder, there are 3 cars crossing the start finish line, a couple of 100 feet away behind. And it's got that combination of graphic factors that has a comic, in my mind, is both photographic and has a comic book feel, a black and white comic book feel.
That's one of my favorite shots of yours.
I think that's my favorite one of the whole weekend. Yeah.
Yeah. And when I look at it more, it almost looks like it's a human being against an animal. Like that car does not look like a car. It looks like it's looking at this guy, like they're having a staring contest or something like that.
Yeah.
There's a very animalistic feel to that car. And it's, and the fact that you got those 3 cars over the guy's shoulder and stuff like that. And the word Daytona is in there too. So like it kind of says the whole, there's a lot in that picture that to me tells a lot of the story of what you're seeing. So yeah, well worth we'll put this in the show notes. So maybe it'll even be I think this will be maybe there'll be the shot for the file.
The cover, sure.
Cover shot. Yeah.
So anyway, that was just I was, the initial disappointment part of it, being torn as a fan, doing that whole kind of, having that access, having fun, not having fun with the camera. It was very, very stimulating weekend. Meeting the drivers, it's funny that there were a couple of drivers we had big laughs with that were friends of my buddy down there. And both of those guys won their classes. The guy that was on the team that won the race overall. And the thing about Nick Tandy, his name's Nick Tandy, is now he's won the 4 biggest 24-hour races in the world. So, and he's the only person in history to have done that. And I had laughs with him before the race, and I had laughs with him after the race to congratulate him. So that's a once in a lifetime thing. Also when I was telling you about that Corvette that won GTD, they had a factory driver, Lars Kern, a German guy who was friends with my buddy. And we had big laughs with them. They were making fun of my buddy's dad, who they went for a ride somewhere. And their dad, Dustin's dad, got sick and whatever. And they were having a big laugh about that. He ended up winning, and I got to meet him after the race too and congratulate him in person. These are just fantastic memories. And when you're a fan of the sport and you can get that close to it, you can't really go wrong. So, and my initial thought was, when I made plans earlier in the last year to go, was just to say, the last time I was there, I think it was 2017, 2018. And I'm like, I don't know that I'm going to come down here again. I mean, I'm a fan, but it's like some sports, it's better to watch it on TV than it is in person. This race is definitely not that. It's definitely better to be there than to be on TV. You can go record it on your PVR at home and watch it later, but that, the act of being there it definitely adds something. So, and I got a couple of good pictures out of it. So I think I'm pretty.
Just a couple, you think?
Yeah, just a few. Yeah, enough.
So, equipment wise, I mean, just to go into this looks like a very hard thing to photograph, just in general. Things are moving fast.
Yeah.
I mean, you've had experience doing this before, but
yeah,
I just imagine
I guess,
it's not easy.
Yeah. So I settled on, after you chastised me once for not using shutter priority, I started using shutter priority.
I did.
Yeah, months ago. You're like, well, when I was talking about the Rodian, you're like, because I'm an aperture priority dude, always been. So I set the shutter speed to either 160th or 200th of a second, to whatever, 200th of a second. That's fast enough to get a car in focus, mostly with the image stabilization on, but have the background blur and have the wheels turning so that they're blurred. So it looks like the car's actually doing something and not just parked on the track. I can do 4,000th of a second, but the car just looks like it's just static.
It's just
I'm like, great.
sitting there. Yeah.
So And
Go
that's
ahead.
the
Sorry.
shutter speed I used on the XS20 practically for the whole weekend. One thing though that I kind of tripped over when you're in aperture priority is to take the dynamic range off, set it to 100%. Don't set it to higher because then it'll jack up the ISO sooner. So all of a sudden you're at ISO 640 in the daytime when you don't need to be. And that's just
Oh,
a
this is
factor of the
Fuji's
dynamic
kind of.
range.
This is the one
Yeah,
that I'm not a big
their
fan of on
dynamic
Fuji
range.
camera.
Yeah.
The dynamic
Yeah.
range. They have no way to turn it off.
Yeah, so you
I
have to
mean,
bang it down to 100% from 400. I usually have it to
yeah,
400 for my street work just so that I can bring up shadows. Needn't have worried. I mean, at night I was typically 6400. Those night portraits, those night pictures, they're shot at 6400. That picture of that we like there, that was shot at ISO 6400. It was either 3200 or 6400, and it worked fine.
yeah, yeah. And one thing I wanted to ask you about, you're saying you're having problems with the focus. Is it just a lack of experience with, because the XS20, which is one of Fuji's newer cameras, has got the AI built into it in order to be able to focus on, birds and planes and cars.
So
I don't know if you use that.
tried the image recognition or the subject recognition. It didn't ever identify those prototypes as cars.
Really?
It would just get, I would just get the boxes around it like it was just normal zone autofocus.
Oh, yeah.
And when it's also in those canned modes, it's also going for the closest thing. So if it can't find what you're looking for, it's the closest thing. And for me, the closest thing is a fence, which I do not want. So I had to be careful when the car comes into the frame. I have a set spot on like they're coming to me from right to left for the most part, because the cars go around counterclockwise around the track and I'm inside the track always. So if I have the focus spot or whatever you want to call it, the square biased towards the right hand middle of the frame, but on the right hand side. So when it comes into focus or when it comes into the frame, I plant it there, do the half press, and then it follows it. It goes in towards the middle of the frame, and then I kind of line up and I get ready, and then that fence is ubiquitous because I'm shooting just over the fence. Sometimes the camera says, "Oh, I'm not looking at that anymore. I'm going to go to the fence," and then it goes sailing off behind as I pan. So, I mean, I did play with the individual autofocus settings. I don't think I complain about the autofocus part. I think that is just an experiential thing. I think really the biggest problem I had was my panning technique was not like it used to be. I think I would stop the pan at the round, and I was doing 4 frames a second, 5 frames a second, just enough to get 5 or 8 frames in that time that the car's going by. And in that maybe 1 frame would turn out, which is enough, but that enough for me to get a picture of that particular car, but not enough in terms of statistical happiness for me that, I got what I meant to get. So I've got more practice to do. I don't know if it's this weekend or next weekend. There's the women's freestyle skiing competition over at the ski hill over here. I might attend that. And, there's the speed skating. I think there's a World Cup speed skating event at some point this winter. So I'll go to that and just practice with that lens. I did get got some happy pictures. My friends are happy with the pictures that I did take.
Yeah, they look great. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm not, but I just remember going there with my Canon gear and it was IS mode 2 so that I could do the pan. I would just put the car in the middle of the frame and it was like a tank. With the Fujis, it's a little more like you've got a precision instrument in your hand, where the Canons were like, it was a sports tank, and it was more set it and forget it, right?
Yeah.
And
well, that's interesting. All right.
Yeah, just a different feel. I don't mind. I'm comfortable with Fuji menus and Fuji, where the controls are and everything. It's just, this is my first time at the race with this particular lens camera combination. So I didn't come up with nothing.
No, and it sounds like you had a good time because you were 75% there as a fan.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so you have that as experience. Yeah, I think like for me, I look at this kind of stuff and, it's okay. I mean, like the cars, I mean, the pictures I'm looking at now are the ones that you shot all the cars, like as just like a record of the cars. But the black and white shots in the pits, there's actually a couple of color shots too in the pits. There's one really nice one with like I don't know, it's an orange and black car.
That's a P2 car. Yeah.
Yeah. You captured the an action scene with the tires being swapped out, and those lights are there too, the fluorescent lights you're talking about. Almost was like an indoor shot too because of the lighting.
It looks like it's inside a shop kind of. Low ceiling. Yeah.
I mean, those are the parts for me as like the human drama part of it that is very interesting, as these captured these captured moments. But I think you did a great job overall. I mean, it's nice to see all the cars. I mean, some of them do look like spaceships and stuff. Mm-hmm. But I do like those. I like those personal moments. That one person sleeping with the helmet on, and And anyway,
yeah, he's the fireman for which team? Anyway, he would have been on the pit stand for the whole 24 hours.
Jeez.
So he's just there to stand there with a fire extinguisher.
Yeah.
And then he goes back to sleep. So then they call the car and they tap him on the shoulder. You wake up, you get the fire extinguisher, you get ready.
Yep.
You stand there just in case. All right, boom, the car goes back out onto the track. He puts it back down, and he puts his head back. And that was taken at about noon. I think I took that picture about noon. The race ended at 20 to 2. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, the one shot that really got me is you have a photograph of, it's not racing, but it's an old VW bus that's a pickup.
Yeah.
And if you've never seen one of these things, these old VW buses, like somehow VW decided to cut one in half and add a pickup bed to the back of it. And there's like the VW bus, Volkswagen bus at the front part of it with 3 doors. And there's a cab inside. I think there's 4 seats. And then it's got this pickup on it. And my dad had one of those in Provincetown. And it was army green, one of those things. And it had that distinctive VW engine sound. You almost can't describe it, but you can if you know a VW, you know the sound.
Yeah.
It's almost like a very wet engine sound. I don't know how to describe it, but anyway, it ended up getting totaled one day. So, but it was I haven't seen one of those in a long time.
I don't think I've ever seen one. I know the microbuses, but I'd never seen the double cab pickup before. So that was my first.
Double cab pickup. Yeah. It's just, and this one is the picture you took is all sort of rusted out and stuff, but anyway, so, all right. Well, any final thoughts about it for you? Cause I just want to.
No, a lot going on. Like I was away from the show, and I did a lot while I was away. So I was a good student.
Final thoughts what final thoughts of Daytona? That's been like
of Daytona. I'm probably gonna start going back, and I had a great time. There's a lot of once in a lifetime things that happened there, and people I got to meet, and action I got to cover, and it was fulfilling in that way. I mean, I guess I was tired when I came back, but I felt like I'd been gone well, no, but I'm usually overstimulated and kind of like miserable when I came back, but I wasn't. I was fine. I was kind of energized by it. So I think I'll be making this an annual pilgrimage. Might be doing that. So
yeah.
So yeah.
Well, if you do this more, it'd be great to see you make a project out of it, of some way, and like more of this kind of stuff that we're looking at, the black and white stuff of the behind.
Yeah, I'm fine just doing the black and white thing. Absolutely.
Yeah, it's just those moments are really nice. I think they resonate for those of us who are not into the sport necessarily, but you can pick up on the human struggle of it, and that brings it closer to like someone like me who doesn't really know it. So. But definitely that one with the guy standing in front of the car and the car is looking at him like, get the hell out of the way.
Yeah. Well, that's why he's crouched like that. He's like, please don't run me over.
Right. It's just like, but it's definitely like, there's like a standoff there a little bit. It's anyway. That's what I love about photography, though. It's like you can start, I mean, even if anything, you can start putting in these stories into the images, and it's just the scene that's going on. But here you are especially because you took away the color in the picture. I think that makes it even more of a brings more of the story in there.
I think it has more feeling of night to it. Actually, it's black and white.
That's true. Yeah. Those lights, and there's just a good energy to that. So, if anything, you definitely came out with one really, really good picture. So,
thank you.
I like it a lot. Yeah. So, all right. Well, now we've gotten the education on on Daytona, which is great because I didn't know anything about this. I knew that there was a 24-hour race. I just didn't really know what it's about, and I didn't know it was based on a European race too. So, yeah. Well, I'm glad you got a chance to go, and I'm glad you get to share it with us. So.
I am too, and I'm happy to share.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let's put a pin in that. We'll come back to if you show any more pictures, let us know. I would like to see them somehow. Yeah, maybe.
I'm setting it aside now. I got to get back into Japan mode here at some point.
Yeah, you do. But also, maybe you might consider writing a little bit of an article for us.
Oh, I can do that
about this.
Absolutely.
Just to consolidate some of these thoughts into something, which I think would be kind of nice. I would like to actually read what you would say about this. So, all right,
I'll give it some thought.
I'll put that on. Give it some thought. All right. So let's call that a wrap. That was a good show. Thank you. Thanks for welcome back. Yeah. Welcome back to the show. Yeah. So where are we looking for you now these days? Where are all these pictures showing up now?
You can find me on Instagram at Ward Rosin Fine Art. You can find me on, X and Blue Sky and Vero on W Rosin Photo. I have a website which Aldo got hold of me on rosin.ca. And our unofficial sponsor with the relationship between our countries and between us and China being in flux right now. I don't know.
Oh.
But it's ornus.photo. I don't know what I'm going to do with my suppliers, but I got to figure something out there. Right, and that's it for me. How about you, Antonio? Where can we find you?
Yeah, wandering around Blue Sky a little bit, AM Rosario. Yeah, Instagram, AM Rosario Photo. My website is amrosario.com. Just type in AM Rosario, you'll find me. Facebook, I like posting on the Facebook these days, although that's a whole nother story, but Rosario Photo on Facebook. And if you would like to subscribe to our Substack newsletter to read what Ward will probably write about soon, I just put up one about a week ago. Little essay, which I like doing. Anyway, subscribe to our Substack. It's a good way to support us, by the way. It's another way to contact us. streetshots.substack.com. And look, if you'd like to support the show in another way, just like Zunabar did, Mr. or Miss Zunabar, whoever you are, you can buy us a coffee at buymeacoffee.com/Antonio Rosario. That's a direct way to support the show. And, I never put up my zines up here. You know what? And again, I still haven't finished our zine. So that's the next thing. That would be a great way to, once I get that done and we can put it up there and people want to buy it. That's a good way to support it. But we'll get that done soon. I've been thinking about that. So, because it's a good book. I want to show it to the world. I want to show our pictures to the world. So. All right. Alrighty. Well, thanks for hanging out with me tonight.
No problem. It was fun reminiscing.
Yeah.
Of 2 weeks ago.
Yeah. Next week, next episode, we'll have our non-alcoholic beers, and we'll probably still pass out.
Yeah. I got sleepy. Yeah.
Get sleepy. Yeah. All right, man. Thanks for joining me tonight, and everybody. We will see you in a couple of weeks. And thanks for joining us.
We'll see you. Good night.
Good night.